Introduction to API SIFE, Source Inspector Fixed Equipment is a guide. And remember that there is a new term here, surveillance. This can be a potential exam question, quality surveillance. So we have quality control, personnel who do the job, the inspector personnel who verify the job, and quality surveillance is more than an inspection. It's inspection is part of the quality surveillance. So if a question comes in the exam asking for what is the duty of the source inspector, is quality surveillance. It's not simply inspection. Is a guide for source inspector to determine whether manufacturer's own quality system have functioned appropriately, so that at the end of the day, the purchased equipment and materials meet contractual agreements. Source inspector normally represents the purchaser or the client. It's assumed that the supplier, vendor, or S-V have already been pre-qualified by a systematic quality review of their process and or facilities, confirming that the vendor has the ability to meet the requirements of the contractual agreements. It is here mostly it's manufacturing a package, such as a heat exchanger or a pressure vessel or a column or a tower or a steel structure. Qualified vendors are included in the approved vendor list, AVL. Source inspector to verify that certain vital steps in the inspection test plan has been satisfactorily accomplished prior to completion of the fabrication and or shipping. The focus of the exam is on source inspection issues and activities, that is quality surveillance, rather than design or engineering knowledge contained in the reference standards. Let's go and see some important terms and definition. Annealing heat treatment. Heating a component and holding it at a specified temperature for some time and then cooling it at a suitable rate. Annealing changes the microstructure of the material and reduces hardness, improves machinability, and eases cold working. As you can see, the temperature going up, at a constant rate you heat it, there is a holding time, and then you bring it down to the atmospheric pressure temperature, and there is a critical temperature above this that you should hold this temperature, and that's when the recrystallization happens and the microstructure of the material changes. Also reduces stress for a stress relaxation purpose. Certificate of conformance issued by manufacturer supplier certifying that the equipment or material meets the required specification. For example, it might be a material report, or it might be the whole vessel. It is built according to ASME Section 8, ASME U stamp, or any code or specification that is in the contract. Calibration, checking a measuring instrument or gauge against the master calibrated device to find the percentage of deviation in order to minimize measurement error or the accuracy of that, the degree of accuracy, and establish the accuracy of the measuring device. Cold working is a plastic deformation, forming, rolling, drawing below the recrystallization temperature of the metal. While hot working is again the same plastic deformation above the recrystallization. So normally forging is done, for example, above the recrystallization temperature of the metal. Destructive testing the metallic samples destructively in order to determine their mechanical properties. Can be tensile test, bend test, and Sharpie impact test. There are also other tests that are termed under the testing group, such as hydro-pneumatic test, leak test, that don't destructive component. A destructive testing process involves extracting sample coupons from component and testing for characteristics that cannot otherwise be determined by non-destructive testing, such as as we say, the sharp impact test, tensile bending test, and material test. The work process involves breaking and or testing coupon samples to failure, thus usually grading the component from which the samples were extracted and fit for continued service. Deviation is any difference between actual design, fabrication, material, and the purchase order requirements. For example, the structural material, say if it was in purchase order, was SA285, but it was not available in the market. Vendor is using SA385, which is a better and more expensive material at his own cost, but still it is considered deviation. So normally a form called deviation, concession, and technical query is filled by the supplier vendor, noting any impact on cost, delivery, and quality. Purchaser need to review and approve or reject it. So if it is before the purchase order, it is concession. If it is the same thing is after the purchase order asking for a change, then it is called a deviation by definition. There is also part of management of change program where all changes need to be documented, reviewed for impact and approved. Dry film thickness of paint and coating is measured by a DFT gauge. Thickness of the paint after it has been dried and the solvent evaporated. Otherwise, they call it, in comparison, wet film thickness, which is not yet dried. So dry film thickness is actually equal to volume of solid into wet film thickness. Say a solid has got a solvent or a paint has got a solvent where the paint is dissolved in the solvent. So once you apply the paint and the solvent evaporates, and the solid part remains. It might be 40%, 30%, or 50% of the whole paint. So it's normal to say that 40% of that would be remaining, and say 60% will be evaporated eventually, because then the thickness would reduce also accordingly. So if the wet film thickness is say 100 micron, and it was a 40% volume of solid, so only 40 micron remain after evaporating the solid. Here you can see a paint thickness measurement gauge, and so normally there is some shims or plastics with non-thickness. You just calibrate it and see that it's actually giving the right reading, because you know the thickness of these shims, 2 or 3 different thicknesses you use for calibration, and then use it on actual material. Engineered equipment are custom designed and engineered, and this is against as against the non-engineered equipment, which is off the shelf. EPC is actually engineering procurement construction company, and examiner is exclusively used for non-destructive examination. Heat affected zone is part of the base metal next to the weld that has had its metal structure affected by the heat of welding. HAZ has the highest hardness compared to the weld and base metal, and susceptible to crack and brittle fracture. As you can see here, this is the weld pool or weld metal, and then it's solidified, turns into weld, and the base metal is here, so the unaffected material. And then there is just next to the weld there is a heat affected zone. Now there is a lot of temperature difference. This can be like 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, and the base metal is ambient temperature. So because of this temperature difference and all this pull and push and contraction, because of it's affected, the base metal just immediate to the next to the weld joint is actually affected by this temperature. So it might its crystal structure might have changed, metallurgically changed, so you always have a higher hardness here. Hot working, again, plastic deformation above the recrystallization temperature. It can be forging, rolling, forming under high temperature. Inspection means verifying compliance of material, component, and equipment against the code, specification, drawing, standard, or a purchase order. How? You verify that by measuring, testing, or gauging one of more characteristic of the product to determine conformity. So it's verifying compliance to determine conformity. That's what inspection is. Inspection waiver is permission issued in writing by the purchaser client to the supplier vendor to proceed with the production shipment without the purchaser's source inspector verification for a specific activity. Inspection waiver is issued for hold points. So if you got a hold point, that means the vendor cannot proceed until it's approved by the client, and in turn it is actually the inspector to be present there and verify this, representing the client. So in that case, if for any reason, if the client does not wish to attend or doesn't have the inspector, or for any other reason, they should issue an inspection waiver so there is no delay on the job. And this is only issued for hold point, because by definition hold point means the vendor cannot proceed until that activity has been approved by the client or purchaser. Whereas witness point means the purchaser still notifies the vendor still notifies the purchaser of the date and the location of that test, but if the purchaser representative or source inspectors representing the purchaser or the client does not attend, it does not hold back the supplier to proceed. Inspection and test plan, a detailed plan checklist for the source inspection activity that guides the source inspector in her quality assurance activities at the supplier vendor side with reference to applicable technical information, acceptance criteria, and reporting information. The supplier vendor should also have their own ITP to guide their fabrication personnel and quality assurance personnel in the necessary quality steps and procedure. So here the guide says that there should be two quality plans. It implies inspection test plan. One is prepared by the inspector to say to annotate and see which points he has to attend, and there is another one by the vendor. In practice, normally the one by the vendor also includes all the relevant parties. I'll just bring a inspection test plan to see how it is. So normally a single ITP where intervention point of key player, sub-supplier, supplier, third party, authorized inspector, and client is annotated, and the ITP shows testing and examination activities, control or QC procedures used, acceptance criteria, and verifying document such as ND report as well. As you can see here, there's normally a logo of contractor, a logo of the job identification of the contractor or the purchase order, their own internal number, and the company or the purchase order number, the company's number, and the title of the job, which is here a medium voltage motor, and it says what this I or inspection test, R is for review of document report, H is hold, W is witness. So the inspection codes are mentioned here normally, and then here on the main body of the inspection test plan you have item numbers, so the sequence, description of activity. For example, here it is equipment checked for any damage and carries correct circuit identification, and then you have description of activities, then you have a control reference procedure or QC procedure, how it is done. So what is to be done, how it is done, who is responsible for it, and then what is the acceptance criteria, and what is the verifying document. So it could be a drawing, a test reports, etc. And then here there would be intervention point of relevant parties, subcontractor, contractor, client, third party, etc. It could be 4 or 5 columns here for the relevant parties. Maximum allowable working pressure is the maximum gauge pressure at the top of the pressure vessel allowed by the design code, because as you go down the pressure is increased due to a static head, with the highest pressure being at the bottom. Normally if the liquid is, say, water with a specific gravity of 1, which every feet of height you have an additional pressure due to a static head of 0.433 psi gauge. So as you can see here, the maximum pressure is here, the maximum allowable pressure gauge is put here, so, and this might be more, so the reason we put it here because we want to see the most onerous situation. Why I brought this, because you should know the symbol of the materials. Mg is for magnesium, Mn is for manganese. And why you need this, because when you look at the test report, mill test report, the chemical composition, you should know what they stands for, like Cr for chromium, Fe for iron, C for carbon, Si for silicon, and so forth. So material test report is a document that certifies that a material product is in conformance with the requirements, normally with details of chemical composition and mechanical properties such as tensile and yield strength, elongation, complying with an specified industry standards such as ASTM, ASME, or ENBS 10204. So MTR, or material test report, also provide details of manufacturer, lot number, heat number for traceability purpose. So this is a sample material test report. As you can see, there is part number, lot number, sales order number, and the size of the component, and batch number, lot number, heat number, and then you see the chemical composition here. So this is chromium, molybdenum, vanadium, copper, silicon, sulfur, phosphorus, manganese, and carbon. Now, as you go down here, you see that it also tells you the carbon equivalent. What is the carbon equivalent? It's 40.2, and then it tells you they took 2 tests, and on the yield was 56,000, and the second test was 57,000, and then there was 2 tensile tests. The same test, I mean the tensile they take, it was first one was 73 and second one 74, and the elongation was this much, 24%, 21%. And as you can come here, it is as per ASTM A36, A36M, and it also says that it was killed, means the oxygen there was an oxygen scavenger where the oxygen was removed so that the carbon dioxide doesn't combine with the alloying elements and produce to a fine grain structure, a fine grain particle. Practice, they say, okay, fine grain particle. So it's practically telling the chemical composition, the traceability, which is here on the top, the strength, tensile test, and tells you also how it was made. And to see that this was actually according to, say, to ASTM A36, you have to go to ASTM and see that this mechanical test and chemical composition falls within the that range of the what ASTM A36 tells us. Non-conformance report, NCR, a report filled out by the source inspector or supplier detailing an issue that has been discovered in contravention or against the project contractual agreements such as the purchase order, engineering design, specified code, standard, or procedure. The NCR explains what went wrong, proposes corrective action, repair, reject, downgrade, proposes preventive action to ensure that it doesn't happen again. If it's a repetitive or it's a major non-conformity, you should have a preventive action. And has a target completion date. Items shall be quarantined until NCR is closed in order to prevent their inadvertent use by mistake. Equipment cannot be released until NCR is closed successfully, all the NCRs. So examples of non-conformity report, you see the NCR number, who is the client, the report number or file number, which area it happened, it can be different, which site it happened, and the description of NCR, and source inspector will sign it, supplier representative acknowledge it, and then the rest would be corrective action and preventive action, if any, and then it's signed off by all. And then once the inspector verifies through, say, witnessing a test or the evidence, the documented evidence, he would sign it off as closed on behalf of the purchaser or client. And the evidence normally is attached to the NCR or the record, and this goes to the manufacturer record book. NDE map, as you can see here, a drawing which identifies a specific location where NDE has been conducted on a product component. We can see here we have done MT, PT, RT. This is a very simple NDE map that tells what sort of NDE has done at what location, say on a pressure vessel. Non-engineering equipment, they are off-the-shelf equipment such as valves, fittings, some skid units, instruments, pumps, and electrical gear, usually purchased by catalog, model number, etc. Will typically cost less, and will typically non-engineering equipment means less source inspection involvement. Whereas engineered equipment needs more involvement of the inspector because it is tailored to made to tailor. Nominal pipe size, a standard for designating pipe sizes, inches, and associated wall thickness. For example, the nominal pipe size for a 4-inch pipe is normally shown as MPS 4. So this is a Schedule 80. We normally have from Schedule 5 to Schedule 80, I think, and or maybe more. And as the schedule increases, the thickness increases of this, and the outside diameter remains the same. So because the thickness increases, the inside diameter decreases, obviously, because it goes downwards. Now, it's not exactly 4-inch, as you can see here. So the 4-inch is somewhere here, not almost in the middle, the size, if you want to go for a 4-inch size to measure. And the outside would be 4.5 inch, and inside is, say, 3.8 inch. But still, they call it 4-inch or MPS 4. So roundness, a deviation from a perfect roundness for a circle, for example, ovality in a vessel circumference, and ASME Section 8 Division 1 UG80 deals out with out of roundness of a vessel shell, and it should not exceed 1% of the nominal diameter of a pressure vessel. So as you can see, you take two readings here. One, this is out of roundness, what it looks like. And if you come here, say if this is a vessel or a pipe, so you measure two diameters or several diameters at right angles, say preferably, and the inside diameter. So if it was perfectly circular, there was no out of roundness, you should get same number. So the difference should be the out of roundness, that should be not more than 1% pressure vessel. PRV, PRD, and PSV are pressure relief valve, pressure safety valve, or pressure relief device, or pressure safety valve. Procedure qualification record. PQR is a supporting qualification for WPS that includes the actual value of essential and non-essential variables used at the time of welding, the coupon, as well as the required test report. Tension sharpie performed the weld that was produced as per WPS. So PQR validates the design or weld design or the WPS, and this is a typical one we took from ASME Section 9 QW483. A template for PQR, you should write the PQR number, the specimen number, it should be traceable to the width, thickness, and this is the cross-sectional area. So width into thickness will be cross-sectional area, and the ultimate load it broke, and the ultimate stress is the ultimate load divided by cross-sectional area, that's shown as PSI or MPa, and type of failure, whether it was on weld or it was on base metal, and then if there was any guided bend test, and so you have to pass or fail. So guide bend test is to show the ductility of the joint. You can also replace it most of the time with a radiographic test. And if there is any toughness test done, it's written here. And PQR should actually mention the essential parameter and any non-essential which was recorded. So not necessarily the non-essential parameter, but WPS should show both essential and non-essential parameters. You cannot revise a PQR, but you can revise a WPS on non-essential parameters without changing the PQR. But if you want to change the essential parameter of a WPS, then a brand new PQR is needed because the essential parameter change. Pressure vessel, any vessel with a specified amount of internal or external pressure above 15 psi. This definition includes heat exchanger, air cooler, columns, towers, steam generators, and other vapor generating vessels. Quality assurance is designing and establishing a system of quality control points to ensure that the product meets the requirements. So designing a system of quality control points. That's what quality assurance is. A proactive quality process that aims to prevent defects and refers to a program of planned, systematic, and preventive activities implemented in the quality system that intended to provide a degree of confidence that a product will consistently meet a specification. So quality assurance prevent defects and by designing or establishing a system of quality control includes systematic measurement, comparison with the standard, monitoring of process, this program, and associated feedback loop that's intended to avoid deviation from a specification. Quality control is actually the specific step in a quality assurance process that aim to find potential defects. So QA prevents defects, QC detects defects or detects NCR. QA prevents NCR. So you want to know if there is a defect or a non-conformity by quality control, you want to find it out. For example, VT, RT, radiography, visual test, penetrant test, UT, dimensional verification, etc. These are all done to make sure that there is no defect there. And if there is, then they should be repaired. The QA process will specify any particular steps necessary during manufacture, fabrication of product. Quenching is a rapid cooling of a heated metal in order to freeze the microstructure. So quenching affects the mechanical or physical properties. It also increases the hardness. So by rapidly putting, the hot metal into the barrel of water, you're actually freezing the microstructure before it cools down on its own and changes. So that's called quenching. Rapid cooling. Like the thirst, when you quench your thirst, you drink a lot of water all of a sudden. So that's where it's coming from. Qualification means demonstrated skill and knowledge, documented training, and documented experience required for personnel to perform duties of the job. For example, a certified source inspector. So qualification is a combination of skill, knowledge, and certification. Certification practically is a written testimony of qualification. So it demonstrates that you are qualified. And quality surveillance is the process of monitoring or observing the inspection activities associated with the material, equipment, component for adherence to a specific procedure, product specification, code, or a standard specified in the contractual requirements. Quality surveillance and source inspection mean the same thing. See the definition for source inspection. Foot square, measure of surface finish on flanges. For example, a surface finish is in the range of 20 to 40 RMS. A machine finish is 80 to 120, and a grid blast head will be more finished in the range of 400 to 500 RMS. A rough surface is 400. So as you go down, the finish is finer. Bloom, when steel surface is blasted in preparation for applying the primer painting, the surface or the first coat the surface may rust quickly because by blasting, you have taken an oxide layer off and made the steel bare and vulnerable to atmospheric corrosion, especially in hot and humid environment. You would observe surface discoloration that occurs on the surface of the steel that has been previously blasted, for example, near white or white metal in preparation for coating. When rust bloom is found, the surface should generally be re-cleaned before coating using the same blast cleaning process. So this is one of the defects during the coating or blasting. Solution annealing is a high temperature heat treatment process where the alloying elements of the material are brought into a solid solution. The solid solution condition is maintained by rapidly cooling the material in order to hold those elements in solid solution. So like freezing the microstructure, as we said. Supplier observation report is documents filled out by the source inspector indicating concerns or other factual description of what was noticed during the course of product surveillance, but not necessarily issues that may be considered defects or requiring NCR. SOR is intended to flag off these issues and problem that and may lead to an NCR if not resolved. So it is like sort of flagging of issues that may actually turn to be a serious problem or delay the project or cost more, and so it's like flagging off a warning sign. The process of providing quality surveillance, monitoring, inspection activities of materials, fabrication and equipment being supplied by supplier for use in the oil petrochemical industry, including upstream, downstream. So that's what source inspection is. It largely consists of verifying that supplier vendor's own quality assurance process is functioning as it should in order to produce quality products that meet the contractual requirements. So source inspector is an individual performing the actual source inspection activities at the supplier vendor facilities in accordance with the applicable inspection and test plan. And a specification is a document, normally from a project, that contains the requirements and acceptance criteria for the manufacturing and fabrication of a specific type of equipment and components. Project specification uses codes and standards as the basis. Tempering means reheating a hardened metal to a temperature below the transformation range to improve toughness. So it's below the transformation range and it's to improve toughness. That's what tempering is, to heat it. Welding procedure qualification record. We talk about this. The intention of welder performance qualification is to prove the ability of welder to weld a joint as per approved WPS in a particular welding position and welding process. So practically, welding WPQ or welding performance qualification demonstrates welder's skill to produce a sound weld, and you can see that the requirement is different from a PQR here, because PQR is to demonstrate that the weld design is actually can meet the requirements. It has the necessary mechanical properties, tensile, yield, and elongation, and etc., and the toughness, like Sharpie by Sharpie test. Whereas the WPQ is demonstrating that the welder can do a job. So one of key differences are WPS, the position of welding is not essential parameter because it's about the weld itself. Whereas a welder may only able to competent to weld in a certain position. So if you change the position, the welder performance might change. So hence the position of the welding is an essential parameter for WPQ, whereas for WPS, it is not an essential parameter. And the test we do here for WPQ to demonstrate that the welder can do the job is a bend test. Whereas for WPS, to verify that it's sound joint is a tensile test. You're testing the strength. And but you can combine both of them together. It means at the same time you can qualify a welder as well as qualify a WPS, but you have to combine both the tests, both the tensile test and bend test. And bend tests, as we said, can be replaced by a radiographic test on most of the processes, except gas metal arc welding, short circuiting, which there is a strong possibility of lack of fusion, which is hard to find by radiography, and hence it should be bend test for that process. The rest is radiography. So you can see here a format for welder performance qualification is welder number. Every welder should have a number, and every 3 feet they should stamp their number or to say that who has done those joints. Identification number, then which WPS he has tested. Is it a test coupon or is it a production weld? If it's a production weld, then you can qualify both the WPS with the and the welder with that, or the WPS already qualified, so the welder start doing the production weld rather than test coupon. You can also use a production weld, but then that is at your own risk or the supplier risk. So if he fails, then that production weld needs to be cut out. But if he knows the welder is good, so he would also use a production weld for testing welder with date welded, UNS or grade number of the metal, the thickness, which welding process used, was it a plate or pipe, base metal P number, F number, filler metal, how many process, 3 layers, 2 layers, or position, which position they use, and which process they used. So this is a typical one, welder performance qualification, and based on this, once they pass the test by a bend test or a radiographic test, then a welder ticket or is given, a welder card that he should always keep it with himself. If anybody asking him, he should produce it at the site to show that he's qualified. It's like holding a driving license when you're driving. Tolerance is engineering tolerance referred to limits of specified dimensions, physical properties, or other measured values of components. And welding procedure specification designed by welding engineer to produce a joint with the required strength. This cycle is extensively used on many industries, and it's a plan, do, check, act cycle, PDCA. So what it practically says, you plan before you start the job, you plan it, then you do the job, then you check that what you have done is right, and if there is any improvement you need to make, or any alteration or repair you have to make, and then act upon it. Means revise your procedure, do whatever is necessary. So this is a continuous process. So it's never-ending continuous process, and it's a very good philosophical way of showing that. For example, Source Inspection Management Program, ITP, and project-specific inspection planning activities, again, preparing the ITP, source inspection for doing it. Source inspection, you perform it, you do the examination, the tools, equipment, you practically implement the ITP, do the vendor visit, any NCR needed, non-conformity, you issue, the vendor issues it, and you produce an inspection report. So all the major part is the do section, but then you need to plan. The plan is the ITP and all the associated procedures. For checking, for a source inspection, you can check that, see that what went wrong, what could be done better, what mistakes could be avoided. So once you learn from that mistakes, from lesson learned, or like pondering that what could be improved, then strengthen those weak areas. For example, it might be something personal, like report writing could be done better, safety could be done in a better way, better familiarity with QC procedure with codes and specification, better conducting pre-fabrication meeting or pre-inspection meeting. Training is an organized program developed to impart the skills and knowledge necessary for qualification.